the recording started. Welcome to our webinar on lead no matter what, when, where, who, lead no matter what. And so I would just ask that we go to the Lord. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this technology that allows us to be here in each other's living rooms, kitchens, cars, wherever. This technology lets us all know it's just like we're so close. Lord, I thank you for all of the people that are attending from all over the country and the people that are listening to this later. We just appreciate and thank you for their attendance. I pray for Mike and Andrea, Lord. I pray for them to be filled with your mighty presence, that they share honestly, and that each of us that is listening is encouraged to step out in faith and lead no matter what, no matter when, no matter who, no matter where. And I pray this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Well, it is my privilege to introduce Mike and Andrea Berletic. They live in Minnesota. I'm going to let them tell you. They're the parents of 3 children, 24, 22, and 13, which seems crazy. That's amazing. Mike is a sales consultant with Toyota, and Andrea is an information desk attendant and tour guide at the Mayo Clinic. They both serve mightily for the Lord. They are on their management team at church. Mike oversees he's the director of their facilities. I guess all of the facilities is taken care of by 60 to 70 volunteers. And then Andrea is in charge of their food court, another 40 to 45 volunteers. My guess, maybe a few overlaps, who knows. But anyway, one of the funny things when we were preparing for this is that Andrea shared that sometimes they bite off more than they can chew. And so they have learned to be very intentional about praying and seeking the Lord when they're looking at what ministry options that they should choose for him. And I am thankful for them and all they have done to serve the Lord and to serve our ministry. And so without further ado, Mike and Andrea, please.
Hi.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks for having us.
Well, we're glad to have you guys. And I thought to get to know them a little better, the easiest way is just to jump right in and have them say, what happened, no matter what happened to prompt you to get involved with First Place for Health?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. The one thing that I will say is we're not experts at any of it, but we just hope our story can kind of encourage other people to try different things, try new things in leading First Place for Health. But our journey started in 2007 at our church because there was a couple that got up and talked about First Place for Health, that they were starting a new Bible study group about living healthy. And at that time, we were the largest, we were the heaviest in our life. And as they were talking, Andrea gave me an elbow to the ribs and said, "We should do this." And I elbowed her back and I said, "Maybe you should do it," because it sounds like a women's thing. But it was a man and woman that were up there. So, for me at that time, I was traveling 5 different states around Minnesota and raising 3 kids and putting on 50,000 miles a year traveling in the supermarket industry. And, life was busy and it was hectic, and my schedule didn't allow me to be a part of First Place for Health. So I was not on board right away.
Right. At the time in 2007, our kids were 14, 12, and 3. And our older 2 were always involved in youth sports pretty much year round. And Mike was usually a coach for any one of the sports that they were in, for one of the kids at least. And I was at the time probably just coming off the heels of PTSA president and really involved in school activities, but also have always served at church. So we both served. Even back then, I was serving in food court. I wasn't director, but serving, and you were the director, or you were serving in facilities at that time too. So we just had a lot that we were juggling, and he felt pretty strongly we didn't have room in our life.
And it was kind of funny because they were going to start leading, right? They were going to have a group that met every other Wednesday. And
the reason they were going to meet every other Wednesday is because at the time, the church that we were attending, which is still the same church, but it's evolved over the years. At that time, we were meeting in a school. So every Sunday, we would set up church and then tear down. Some of you maybe go to a church like that. So we didn't have a building, which meant during the week, things, activities are difficult for a church when you don't have a building. So the couple that was going to start First Place for Health said, hey, let's hold it every other Wednesday when the church meets. To save money, we only rented the school every other Wednesday for our Wednesday evening activities and service. And so this couple thought, hey, we'll just meet every other Wednesday. After talking to First Place for Health national directors and such, they were encouraged that you really need to meet weekly. So originally when Mike was like, oh, I think we're too busy, I just don't see that we can fit that into our schedule, I felt pretty strongly after hearing what it was about and researching it online that we couldn't pass up this opportunity. I really thought this was an awesome opportunity, and so
she talked me into it.
Well, I used this theory. This isn't the rest of our lives. It's just a 12-week session. I mean, it's, if it doesn't work after 12 weeks, we can, we don't have to go back. It's just 12 weeks. And it's only every other week at that,
Right.
So I talked them into it. And then about a week before we were going to begin, the leaders reached out to all of us who said we wanted in and said, oh, we found out that it really doesn't work well to meet every other week, so we're going to meet every week now. And so on the off week when we're not at school for church, we'll meet at our house.
And I said, nope, not me. That's not what I signed up for, because I signed up for every other week, but now they were going to meet every week, and I just didn't know how I could
fit that in.
Yeah.
So again, I kind of went to it's not the rest of our lives. It's only 12 weeks. This is such an awesome opportunity. And so he finally caved and said, okay, we can do it for 12 weeks.
Even with a hectic schedule. But it just meant I had to kind of prioritize things and make it more important for this session. And we were the heaviest we'd ever been. We tried losing weight on our own before, and that didn't work.
But we weren't the people who did Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and all of those. We just
knew that we had to lose some weight.
We needed to eat healthier and we needed to move our bodies. We were both college athletes. Mike played football and baseball. I was volleyball. So we've been super active, and we were really encouraged that our kids sort of were following in the same footsteps and that they really enjoyed sports. And so somehow it became, during that season of life, more important that they got exercise and less important that we did. So we literally sat on the sidelines with food and watched our kids get exercise, and we got none as we watched them.
But it was a slow progression. It might have been 4 pounds a year, which isn't that big of a deal, but
over years.
Yeah, over 20 years it does.
So that's really what happened to prompt us get involved in First Place.
I wonder if I could show your before pictures now. I had Andrea, Mike, I don't know if you've seen these yet, but she sent me some pictures to show you. Huh?
I haven't seen them up on the screen. So.
Okay, well, we'll see how they go. So here is, can you see a picture of Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. So, and then here's a picture of Andrea. And then here is a picture of both of you. So.
Yeah. It's weird. It's hard to look at, but then it's encouraging. Hard to look at, but then it's encouraging at the same time.
So how much did you guys lose when you first, what was that session like? Was it?
Well, you want to tell about the first session?
Yeah, well, I didn't lose 75 pounds in the first session, but over almost a 2-year period, I lost 75 pounds. And
wow.
The first session was, that I didn't know, well, first of all, I wasn't I didn't read the Bible very much prior to First Place for Health, and was starting to apply some of the teachings that we would hear on Sundays to my life, and then this was just a progression, I guess, a natural progression. And once we got into First Place for Health, then there were memory verses, there was Bible reading, there was praying, and even though I prayed, just kind of on my own, like God help me, there was just a little more to it. And the Bible verses, I still remember many of them from that first session, because the first week was, now what I am commanding you today is not too difficult for you or beyond your reach. And I found that to be very encouraging, because it was like the Word of God was saying, you can do this, and it's not going to be too hard for you.
So that first session, as you can see how that just rolled off Mike's tongue. Mike took to First Place for Health like a fish in water. It was like it was made for Mike, or Mike was made for First Place for Health. I mean, he just really did the program. Like, okay, they're telling me to memorize a verse, I'll memorize a verse. He didn't fight it. He didn't say, I'm going to pick and choose what I'm going to do. He just said, okay, I can follow instruction and I can do that.
But I didn't just memorize the verse. It was almost like I breathed it into my body, and it became a part of me. That sounds really.
So back in 2007, if that was the first verse in the first session, it's like it still rolls off his tongue. So he really absorbed.
And the second week was just as encouraging and convicting. It's better not to make a vow, or better not to vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. And it was, that struck me like a board over the head, that if I'm going to be in this, then I need to be doing it. Otherwise, it'd be better if I just wasn't even here. And so if I'm going to be here, then I'm going to do it. And
well, it sounds like Mike went right to it. So what does that mean, Andrea? Does that mean that you didn't?
Well, I would have to say I was one of those people that when I joined, I really, really wanted to do it, but I also knew that I was committed to a couple of things that were going to make it hard for me. And one of those was I was working part-time at the Mayo Clinic, and because of the kids and their ages, I was working evenings. And so occasionally it would fall on the evening that we had group. So I missed, during that first session, the most I've ever missed. I was maybe 60% attendance, which is really unlike me. Excuse me. And then our church was also in a building campaign, because like I said, we were meeting in a school, but we had decided that we were going to build, and I was on that, yet another committee I was on. And so that was taking a lot of my time and energy as well. Plus we had a toddler still at home. So it wasn't that my heart didn't desire to, I just couldn't find it in my life to completely surrender to it like Mike was. But I saw him starting to change, and I very much longed to be able to do that. And I started to work my schedule. I got every Wednesday night off with my coworkers. I did a lot of switching. I got out of that building campaign because it ended, and I just made room for it so that by the time we started the next session, and I was like gung ho. So, yeah.
Well, good. Well, I think we'd like to do our very first poll so we can see what about you. So on your screen, I'm going to launch a poll. You have to say, yes, I want to participate in the poll. And it says, what position did you start at when you joined First Place for Health? Are you new and you're waiting to see what God wants? Maybe you're not in or not. Did you start as a member? Or maybe you were assistant, you were helping out right away, or maybe you were the leader right away. So you have to click I'll participate, and you have to click on one of those things. And then I see we have lots of people voting now. We have 16 people, 17, so we're almost up there. We have 30-some plus people joining us, so we'll see what we got here. So we have 64% of the people have voted. So I'm going to give you 10 more seconds, starting 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, more than 82%. So I'm ending the poll, and now I'm going to share the results with you. So hopefully you guys can see on your screen. Looks like 57% of the people started out as a member. 21% are started as a leader, and 21% are new and waiting to see what guys, they're not even doing first place yet. So that's pretty cool. So we're very glad you all are here. That's just very encouraging to us. So we're going to move on from what, and I'm going to ask Mike and Andrea to share when is it that you decided to lead ministry? How did you get into the leadership aspect?
Yeah.
Well, we have been doing the program for a year and a half, 2 years, somewhere in that area, when the people that were leading were going to step aside, and they wanted to see the group continue to go or continue to meet. And so they asked us if we would lead. And, they saw some things in us that we didn't actually see ourselves, or we did a little bit, but, leading a healthy living group seemed like more than we could handle, or that we weren't qualified for it, even though we had success. But, now, it was like, okay, God, if this is what you want, then help us, because, we're over our heads. So that was when we started. So our oldest boy he was a junior in high school.
It was the fall of 2009. So he was,
and our daughter was a sophomore, and the baby was going into first grade. So,
that's when we began. And we led together for, I guess we didn't do the chronological timeline, but for many years. And at the time, our church had not built yet, but we were soon building, or we were in the process of building.
mm-hmm.
So we started to meet at our house rather than at school, and the church wasn't quite ready. So we met at our house for many years, 4 or 5 years we met at our house. And during that time, we had large groups and we had small groups, but we always had a group. I think the largest group we ever had
27
in our house.
Our neighbors were wondering what's up each Monday night. Why do you have so many cars?
Yeah. So and at that time then, because we were such a large group, for the majority of time that we met, we would break into smaller groups then for discussion, Bible study discussion, but always had a large group time as well. And that was a bit challenging with the number in our house, but we just made it work. And I think there was something about the number and the coziness of it that people actually didn't mind. They became part of our family. Our little guy literally grew up with people coming in our house, going to one of the bedrooms to get weighed. And when we finally said, okay, we're moving out to church, he was so surprised. Like it came, like Monday night came, and because we had switched nights too or something, and he's like, wait, isn't it Monday? Aren't we having first place for health? Like he almost felt like part of the group.
Right.
So.
There were benefits to having it in your home too, because you would clean your house every week.
Our house was really clean during that time. That's true. And a number of people had small children, and of course our older kids were around and able to help some with the younger kids, so that children would go in the basement. And we had a full house when we had it at home.
So where else have you led it? So you've led it at home, and it sounds like at a school. How did it work when you were at the school? Did you guys use classrooms or?
Well,
we were in the cafeteria, so we were in an open area,
but off in a corner. It was not super private, but it wasn't ideal. But we just made it work.
Yeah.
In some ways, our house wasn't ideal, but we made it work. I guess no matter where, we just made it work.
Yeah.
So then after we built our church, we moved it out to the church, and that worked well. We had it there for a number of years. And during that time, Mike changed jobs. When the economy was bad, he ended up being laid off and got a different job, the job that he's in now. And his schedule was not allowing him to be as involved in First Place as we had.
Did it for a while. Did it for a year. Yeah.
But it was really difficult. It was just so unpredictable on whether or not he was going to make it. And so he finally said, okay, I can't lead anymore. So he stepped out of leading. The thing we knew it, but it became very apparent once he left. Having a man lead, a couple lead, really encouraged other men to join our group. So we always had men in our group until you left, and gradually the men fell off. And then it became women's only. We didn't advertise it that way. It just, the men just were not as willing to join because it was led by a woman. So a long-time member, when Mike stepped away, I asked her if she would step up and be an assistant with me. So I never really led solo. I led with Mike, and then I led with a co-leader at church. And so she and I did it for a couple of years at church. And then the last year that I was leading with her at church, I had feedback from a number of the women in our group. Where we live, there's a lot of people who live rurally who attend our church. And so a lot of the women would work in Rochester, drive home after work, and then have to drive back into Rochester for First Place for Health. Then that meant when they were leaving church to go back home, they were driving on sort of desolate rural roads. And in Minnesota winters, it's just not, it's a scary thing for women. It can be. Even if the weather is, if we don't have snow, it can be bitterly cold. I mean, you know, we get bitter. We're the 37 degrees. Just today, it's 37. So, so I had become aware of Zoom that we're on right now through First Place for Health and Helen. And so I proposed to my group, would you be interested in trying a 50% hybrid group so that we would meet at church every other week, and then we would meet on Zoom every other week. So we did that for the last year that I was leading a group at church. And everybody really in the group appreciated that. They appreciated the not having to come to church weekly, kind of getting that break of having to drive back in. But if they did appreciate getting together then, because they hadn't seen each other, you know, in person for a couple of weeks. So it was a good way to do it. We enjoyed it that way.
I remember when you were setting it up, I remember us talking about how to pay for the monthly Zoom fee, that kind of thing. So did your group like chip in and help pay for that, or did your church pay for it? How did you do that logistically? Well,
I tell you, the first session that I proposed that we do it, I think maybe I got like 50% of the people saying, oh, I think that's a good idea. And then maybe 50% were like, oh, I don't really get it. They might have been a little hesitant because they don't consider themselves techie enough. And so I decided that first session I wasn't going to charge. I just, I was doing the kind of thing where I had a little bit of a kitty that I had set aside, and I used that. And then the second session, when the feedback was, because of course I gave them the option as we were ending that session, I'm like, okay, so we're coming up on the next session. What do we all think about Zoom, doing the every other? And it was like across the board. We love it. Let's continue on. And I said, okay, so here's the deal. I didn't charge you the first session, but it does cost us to have it. So it was minimal. I think we just added it onto the cost of the book. I think it was like $3 or $4 a person for the entire session.
Right. I mean, for those of you guys that want to look into Zoom, I think it's $15 a month now to have the big, you know, the pro Zoom account. I think it was a little less expensive back when we were starting. $10, but now it's $14.99, I think. So, but anyway, I just wanted to give people, I'm not pushing Zoom. I'm just telling you that's logistically. There's also Google Hangout, which is free for some people can use Google Hangout and stuff. So there is some free options, and you can use Zoom for up to 40 minutes for free. Like you can have 25 people, I think. So, well, we kind of touched on where, so we want to do another poll because we know you all are out there meeting in groups. So some of you aren't in groups yet, and maybe you want to be, or maybe you want to start a group. So if you were going to meet, the poll is, let's see, I have to find the poll before I go. Where do you meet? So I'm going to launch it, and you can actually pick more than one. I think I set this up correctly. If I did it right, you should be able to pick more than one. So where do you meet? Choose all that apply. Church, home, library, fitness center. I know in Pittsburgh, there's a leader that does it in a local bookstore, community meeting room. I visited groups in restaurants, libraries, got a virtual. You know, obviously church is the most common location for First Place, but my sister who told me about First Place, she was doing it in her home. She had preschoolers. She was doing a daytime group. I think maybe during nap time even was when she was doing it. So how she survived all those years with 3 little kids, I don't know. But, you know, we all survive that, don't we? Eventually. Yeah. You don't know that you're going to survive in the middle of it. So if there's any of you in the middle of that, you're going to survive, we promise. All right. So we have 60%. Okay, it's been up for a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So I'm going to share the results with you so you guys can see. So 61% of the people are doing it, you know, in their church, 13% at home, 9% in a community meeting room. So that's very cool. And then 17% of the people are doing virtual. So that's pretty cool. Awesome. Well, Andrea and I are both in virtual groups, so we're not surprised that there's some virtual people here. So that's a pretty common theme. And I think we have 13 virtual options this session coming up, so which is kind of crazy. And if any of you are interested and you're successful at First Place, I'll just put a little plug in there. Email me. I'd love to send you a virtual leader application because all of our virtual leaders have had to have some success, you know, need to have success with First Place. So, all right, moving on, Mike and Andrea, who, no matter who, when we were talking, you both shared different people influenced you on the way. So why don't you tell me about who influenced you on the way?
Well, I'll go first.
Yeah.
There was somebody that influenced me even before we moved back to the Rochester area in northern Minnesota. You know, I was very early on when our older kids were very young. I had an opportunity to work at an insurance agency in a small town and way up near the Canadian border. And when I went to that town, I didn't know anybody, and it was 2.5 hours away from our home. And we came up with the idea that I should go to one of the local churches and ask if there is somebody that has room in their home that maybe I could rent a room. And as it turns out, there was somebody that stopped by the agency where I was working and said, "Yeah, it's amazing because we've never done anything like this before. But when we heard that there was a need for somebody that was new to town, that right away we just said, well, they felt something that God had an inkling that they were supposed to step out of their comfort zone and host me, which was really cool because they fed me, and I worked when the sun came up in the morning and until it went down at night, and sometimes I was even at work later because this was a new adventure. My family's 2.5 hours away, and we had our daughter, the second oldest, was just a newborn. So it was a new adventure, and I just figured I'll just throw all my time into work. But what I was able to witness, I'd come home to their home at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and go to sleep, and because I was tired, but I would wake up at 3 in the morning or 3:30 in the morning because I couldn't sleep any longer because I was worried about now the new job that I have. And when I would step out of my room, I noticed down at the end of the hallway, there was a light on under the door of the bedroom at the end of the hallway. And as it turns out, it was Ray, the people that I stayed with. And he was up early reading the Bible. And I thought that was really strange that somebody would give up their sleep in the morning to read the Bible, because I never witnessed that before. And I, through my journey, I tried reading the Bible, but I failed every time, because I don't know. I started in Genesis and went through Exodus and ended, shortly thereafter. And then I thought, well, I'll try that 365-day reading, of the Bible. And 2 weeks into it, I was a week and a half behind, so that didn't work either. And but that was somebody that had an influence on me, because now when I look back on it, I can just see how uh, it was like it was meant to be, that there's somebody out there that is showing me how to do it, and spend quiet time with Christ. And I even asked him when we were out in the garage one night, and he said, "Well, that's the best time of the day, is the time that I get to spend with Christ. That's why I shut the door to the room, and I just want to be alone with God and read and pray and journal and take notes." So I thought, now, many years later, how that was an influence for me. The people that led our First Place for Health group that got up at church, they were inspiring to us too, and even the pastor of our church. So
he's very focused on health, and he's always encouraged us to have a First Place for Health group at our church, and anything he could do to support us, advertise it, talk about it. So that was influential for us. And like you said, the people who started the couple, wonderful leaders, very encouraging, very filled with grace. Never felt like if I didn't get it all done, that I disappointed them. They just were graceful with us. So, yeah.
Well,
they really influenced us.
One of the questions you wanted me to ask you, Andrea, was about how do you measure success? How did that work? No matter how, what's a perspective that you have on that?
A perspective? Are we talking about ductwork or not yet?
Well, I don't know. Just how to measure. You were saying about.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things that I have through the years of leading, I have at times I feel like I've experienced every emotion while I've led. I've been high because we've had members who have had success in many areas, not just physical success, but in many areas. I've sort of had breakthroughs and emotional breakthroughs, or spiritual even as well. And then I've had lows because I feel like people have been disappointed because they had high hopes, and I've had high hopes for them. And I've struggled with just how do we measure success in First Place for Health. And I really think that, we need to, one of my favorite verses that I've had to memorize in First Place for Health is, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is for you, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And truly, the world would tell us, you would measure success by how many pounds were lost.
And how good you look.
And how fast you lost those pounds. And yeah, how good, and how many sizes you went down, and how your attendance was, and how well did they memorize those verses, and all of those things that we have as markers and tools to help us in the program. But if we use those to measure our success, we really are going to set ourselves up to be discouraged. And there were times, I have to say, that I was very discouraged because I was using the world's markers for judging how successful our groups were, when in fact we're probably planting seeds, and success may come years and years later that we never see. But we're planting seeds. Everything we're doing, we're just planting seeds. And sometimes we see the fruit, and sometimes we don't. But we can, if we're doing this with the right heart and with the right attitude, with God's grace, then we can be assured that there will be fruit. We may never see.
You never know how you're going to impact somebody else, and it may not be right away, but it might be just down the line a little bit more. And so I think speaking the truth and offering hope to people, and I think that's pretty important.
Well, I think when we were talking about this earlier, when we were prepping, I was sharing with you the attendance thing. I always used to measure, okay, if it was a great session, if 80% of the people were at the end, and we were talking about, they might be at the end, but they don't come to the victory celebration or something. You're so disappointed because the enemy does such a good job of telling us how we're not measuring up. And it's so frustrating.
Sure.
And I was telling you about this one lady where she was really struggling. She had a lot of issues. She was working with a counselor, and she wasn't even getting on the scale per her counselor. She just wanted her to attend a support group. And so her goal for the whole session was to come all 12 weeks. And so I knew this, she knew this, we had talked beforehand, and that was her goal. But she continuously looked around and measured herself against other people's goals and was constantly saying, showing. And I had to keep reminding her success was just showing up and coming, and that was her success. And she did finish that session, I'm happy to say. And the amazing thing is I've since seen her, and she's become a leader eventually, and is she still battling it? Absolutely, but she is leading no matter who the enemy. I think sometimes it's who is speaking into telling us that we can't do it. So not that I want to give the enemy any power, because he doesn't have any. Of course, we're about ready to, Jesus has got all that power. However, I do want to just mention that we have an enemy out there who doesn't want us to lead. And he will be glad to tell us all the reasons why we shouldn't. So we can't listen to him. We can't.
One of your verses, right?
Yeah, your verses.
One of your favorite verses of the weapons of the world. Yeah, right?
Yeah. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds.
Woohoo! I like that verse a lot.
First week. That was in the first week.
Yeah, I know. That's a good one. By the way, Mike, I wanted you to share that Deuteronomy 30:11 is my life verse. Now what I'm commanding you today is not too difficult or beyond your reach. That verse that says it all. If you really feel and sense that the Lord wants you to do this, to be on this wellness journey, it says right there, now what I'm commanding you today is not too difficult. And I always used to say, it sure feels too difficult, but it says not, and it says it's not beyond my reach. And that always was so, to me, that's the best part of that verse, is it's not beyond my reach, because with God. And then if you kept reading in Deuteronomy, it's the same place where it says choose life. It's where he's talking to the people, and he's basically saying choose, you choose life, and I choose life. I choose to go. All right, so Andrea, tell us about ductwork. I can't wait. I added, you guys, this was on the thing.
We have a surprise for you, Helen.
Yes.
I have a little visual.
Oh, goodness. Ooh. You have to stay still. Stay still. Okay. There you go.
Okay.
Ooh. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay, so I tell you, I kind of mentioned before, I kind of have been all over the place when I've been leading. I've had highs, I've had lows, I've been encouraged, I've been discouraged, and recently I've kind of been focused on a verse. I'm in a virtual group, and we're kind of coming to the end of our Bible study. And I know the last verse, I think we'll be in it as a group next week. But the last verse is from Hebrews. It's Hebrews 12:15. I don't have it memorized yet, but it's, see to it that no one misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. So that's Hebrews 12:15. And I really feel like at certain times when I was leading a group that had somebody brought that verse to mind for me and reminded me of that, and reminded me of this visual, this piece of ductwork, and said, you know, really, your first place for health group is not your group, it's God's group. And your role here is to be a piece of ductwork that runs between God and the members of your group. And our goal as a leader is to be a clear piece of ductwork, not stand in the way of what God has planned for the members of your group, but to facilitate and help his plan and his will. So as you can see, I currently have a clogged ductwork. And I would be a much more effective leader if it was clear. So I'm going to find out why my ductwork is clogged. I'm going to pull out some of this muck that's in my duct and find out, oh, here, this one says schedule too full. So if I'm a leader and I just have too many things on my schedule, maybe I'm not being an effective leader because I need to really clear something on my schedule. So that could be something that clogs your ductwork and makes you not be as an effective leader as you could be. Let's see what else is in here. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, unrealistic expectations. Maybe you're just so excited about being a leader at the beginning of the session and you think, oh, we're just going to lose all this weight and everybody's going to show up every week and they're going to get all of those commitments done. Everyone's going to memorize all 10 verses and we're just going to do awesome. And week by week, the expectations are not being met. And they just weren't realistic because people are human. People have other things happen that prevent them from getting everything done. And as a leader, if those expectations are set too high and unrealistic, that can be extremely discouraging and it can block your ductwork and keep you from being an effective leader and making sure everyone experiences the grace of God. Here's another piece of trash in my ductwork. My attitude. Well, you know, I've been leading First Place for Health forever at my church, and I'm really the only one that can do it. Nobody else will do it. So where's our attitude? Are we there with the right attitude? Do we want to be doing this? Do we want to show the grace of God to other people? Do we want to be a clear conduit to our members? I think there's one more piece. Let's see what it is. Oh, as a leader, am I living the program? Am I actually doing the program? Am I tracking my food? And am I memorizing the verses each week? Am I doing my Bible study? Am I coming prepared? Am I living the program? Because if I'm not going to be a clear conduit between God and his group.
So if you get those things cleared out, then it can flow.
And everyone
through you, but
can be, have a taste of the grace of God. So I think that would have been really encouraging for me when I was a leader to be reminded that that's really my role, not to play God. Let God be God and stay out of the way. So.
Very cool. Well, thank you guys. That was pretty amazing. So that is the information we were going to share today. So we have time for Q&A. I don't have any Q&As yet. So if you all want to, I forgot to remind you if you wanted to send us a question. So there's a Q&A box on your screen. If you're on a tablet or a phone, you just have to touch your screen and look for something that says Q&A. It has a Q on it on the icon. But send us your questions either for me, for Andrea, for Mike, whatever you can think that you might want to ask these amazing leaders, or it can be about anything. There's no holds barred here, so we'll see about that. I think I'm gonna.
Is that Mike and I did attend Summit one year, 2011, I think, and we really found that very encouraging. And then following Summit, because I learned that there were network leaders, which I didn't even know existed, I became the network leader for the state of Minnesota, and I did that for about 5 years. And that, I'm telling you, was so encouraging when I got to know all of the leaders of the state and met with them probably at least 2 times a year, and really get, we'd get together and share successes and struggles. And I always came away from those things really encouraged to share experiences with other leaders. So, and other network leaders. I got to go to the network leader retreat a couple years in Edisto, South Carolina.
It was awesome.
Locally, we attended an event in Brookings, South Dakota, because the South Dakota network leader had a lot of first place for health people there. So that was the first time we met Carol and
Lewis.
Becky Turner.
Yes.
And then we hosted one in Rochester too. And so that was.
So we have some questions now. We got some questions. So one of them is, can someone new to the program and leading do virtual groups? So anybody can join a virtual group. You can go on to our website. If you go just to the website, there's some scrolling things that say virtual groups. We're registering now. I know a lot of them say registering as of April 15th, but that's our public registration. Our current virtual group members are registering right now. So all of our groups are registered. There are a few private groups where it's invitation only, where someone's leading and they're having specific people come to their group. But otherwise, there's a bunch of ones that you can register for right now. So hopefully anybody can be in a virtual group. Leading a virtual group is different. You have to have had success and you have to fill out an application. And we provide an honorarium to, compensate the leader for their time. All right. The next question is, when is the new members guide coming out and the one that's outdated? And you'll actually be hearing a lot more about that at Summit in July this year and where we are. So we're in our fundraising campaign right now. We have everything planned. So we have a whole bunch of new stuff planned, but it's not just like, when is it coming out? 2018 is really a plan for a lot of new things that we have in the works for First Place for Health. So we're pretty excited about that. And so if you have any interest in helping us financially, you can make a donation and just put relaunch is what we're doing that. But we're having a whole campaign in May. You'll hear about this more, but we have a matching campaign where someone has made a sizable donation to First Place if we get matching donations. So that our month of May will be about that. You'll be hearing more about that soon. So we're pretty excited about that. So hopefully that answers your question, Bev. Next up is Linda's question is, how do you balance unrealistic expectations with accountability? Who wants to touch that one? Yeah, go.
I'll tell you what worked for us. What worked, every situation is different, so I don't know if you're a leader on your own, but in our situation, we had Mike and me, and we balance each other out because I'm the one who's more like, I got to have those expectations met, and come on, people, we can do it. I'm kind of a hard driver, and I want everyone to do well. I almost want it for them more than they want it for themselves, maybe at times. Not that Mike doesn't want it for them, but he's a little more realistic, and our personalities are just that he's probably a little bit more grace-filled than I am. It's just how we are. Just say it like it is. And so, luckily, we had each other now as a single leader. And like I said before, I always was with someone. I brought someone else on, and I think again she and I kind of balanced each other out, and not that we were good cop bad cop, but maybe when she needed to show grace because I was a little harsh, if that's the right word, and I don't really think I was harsh, and I think we took turns doing it, she and I, more than you and I.
Mm-hmm.
So
I can say too, to this issue, I can also be one of those strong leaders that, we can't want it for them. Like we said, we can want it for them, but they have to want it for themselves. I think the key is they come to First Place. When you sign up for a First Place for Health group, they're giving you, the leader, permission to hold them accountable. That's, they came to change. So as a leader, we need to expect that they want to change because that's what they signed up for. I mean, why would you come pay the money and come get the Bible study? Now, we all know we have people that come and don't show up or don't do the work, and I say patience. You just have to pray for those people. But it's okay to say, how are you doing on your goals? So the key is to have them develop the goals, that you know what their goals are, but to have them make their goals for the session. And sometimes if they're unrealistic as a leader, we can say, I don't know, losing 30 pounds this session is a little, and I go to weight because it's an easy one. But, help them find it realistic. So that's my thing. And it is okay, the accountability. I also like to pair people up and let them be accountable to each other through a session too, and it not be falling on the leader. But we're only supposed to ask them. It's not like we're like holding our thumb on them. It's really God that is our ultimate accountability person. Right. So, okay. Another question, a really good question, and I know you guys will like this one. Do you have any tips for organizationally challenged leaders? I'm just saying, we all have had this, but.
Sure.
Right.
Well, I think, number one, put it on paper what you want to accomplish. And during the week when leading up to the meeting, I think it's important to say what do you want to accomplish? And not only that, First Place for Health has, they tell you exactly what you need to do for each meeting. And if you can follow those instructions, you don't have to reinvent it. You just follow it.
Right.
And good things will come out of it. And it will go in a direction that you may not even know.
Right. So when I was a network leader, when I began in 2011 for the state of Minnesota, we had a network leader in place, but she was only a name. She wasn't reaching out to anyone. And so we made a transition. She stepped out, I stepped in, and then I very quickly realized, like Helen alluded to at the beginning of this webinar, that I can tend to bite off more than I should or than I can chew. So I realized I really need to bring somebody in who has some gifts that I lack. I am not highly organizational, would not be one of my gifts. In fact, being involved as a network leader in the First Place for Health, I got to take the Strengths Finders assessment and learned that my strong suit is called ideation. I can come up with great ideas. I might not be the organized person to see those through. And so I am constantly looking for people to pull on my team, if you will. And I did. I found a leader in another community in Minnesota about 70 miles away from me. And we were a team for network leaders in the state of Minnesota. She's highly organized. So this is a wimpy answer to your question, but any tips? Yeah, find another leader who's organized.
I agree. That's the answer I would give. If you're not organized, find somebody to come alongside with you. We call it the admin person at the church that I used to belong to. That person handled all the details. They scheduled it with the churches, kept track of who paid what, that kind of stuff. We had another leader who created a schedule that, said, here's what we're going to do every week, that went along with, the leader's guide. I wanted to just say, this leader's guide tells you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, before, after, and during. I love this. I love it. So hopefully that will help you. Find somebody else that will help you, that will read this book, because the problem is the organized person will have read it like me. I've read it a million times. And the disorganized person is like, where is that book? I remember that I bought it. So find somebody that wants to read the book and use it. That's my best advice. And pair with them. Last, we're out of time, but I'm going to ask this one question. It says, how long should a leader plan for meetings to last, and should they limit the class size? So the answer to that question is, how long should a meeting last, is exactly, I think it's on page 56 of this leader's manual, which is just awesome. It shows us exactly. It's on page 46, 10 pages off. So First Place recommends an hour and 15 minutes, with the first 15 minutes being greeting, weighing in, and the bulk of the meeting is an hour. Our virtual groups last that same amount of time. And limit class size. I can tell you that I have seen classes as big as 90 people, all in a cafeteria around tables, and they do the wellness topic as, you know, somebody's presenting, and then they do their Bible study discussion in groups of 5 to 6 people. At my church, where I came from Pittsburgh, we had large groups, and we always broke into small groups. Andrea alluded to it earlier. I had 23 people in my very first group. I was overwhelmed. But the Bible study, if you look, sorry, preaching to the crowd here, but I get fired up about this. Break into small groups for your Bible study discussion. It makes a difference. And if you need something to show you that you're supposed to do this, at the very beginning, in the back of our Bible studies, under Leader Discussion Guide, every single one of our Bible studies says to break up into small groups of 3 to 4 people. And so that's the answer. You can have 90 people in your First Place for Health group. The key is breaking up into small group discussions so everybody gets a chance to share. All right,
Right.
we're out.
So,
Go ahead.
I just want to add something because Susie, when she asked that question, she said, should you limit class size starting out? And maybe Susie has never led. I don't know what her story is, but from her question, I would guess that that's what she's maybe not led before. And I would just have to say this, that let's see, maybe you've heard this saying before. God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. If you're limiting your size strictly because you're afraid of the size, God will equip you. Let's not stand in the way of God. He has a plan. He'll use you. It's going to be fine. If it's because of room or space, that's a whole different thing. I realize if like you're in an apartment and you can only have a certain number of people, that's different. But if it's strictly because you're afraid of the numbers, God has a plan, and it's in his hands, and you're the conduit.
Amen. Well, guys, like I said earlier, this will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow. And you can go to our YouTube channel, just go to YouTube and search for First Place, or go to our website, and at the very top page, there's a link to our YouTube channel and one of those little icons. So we are so glad. Thank you, Andrea and Mike. I knew this was going to be interesting and fun. And everyone, be encouraged that like when God calls us to lead, when you hear, and he doesn't have to call us, it just can be that little yucky feeling inside when you hear about it or you found it on the website. However it is that the Lord prompted you to be here today or listening to this later, just God bless you as you step out in faith and lead for Jesus. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.